An insecure mind is like a room filled with smoke. You try to see the exit, but everything seems blurry, confusing, suffocating. How many times have you found yourself like this, with jumbled thoughts, unsure if the decision was the right one, unclear if your voice had value or if it was just an echo of doubts? This is the nature of insecurity. It jumbles up ideas, creates scenarios that don't exist, and distorts reality until you convince yourself that you are not capable. But the Stoics already knew this enemy 2,000 years ago. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself in his diaries precisely to organize his mind in the face of confusion. Epictetus reminded us that it is not facts that disturb us, but the interpretations we make of them. And Seneca warned that we suffer more in our imagination than in reality. What they were all saying in unison is simple. Mental clarity is not a gift you receive, it is a practice you cultivate. Insecurity arises from excess comparison, automatic thoughts, external noise. Clarity, on the other hand, arises from cutting, conscious choice, focus on the essential. When you learn to separate fact from interpretation, priority from distraction, progress from perfection, your mind ceases to be a battlefield and becomes a safe place. And this is not abstract philosophy, it is emotional survival. Today you will learn 7 Stoic practices to eliminate mental confusion and dissolve the insecurity that holds you back. These are simple but transformative steps, because thinking clearly does not mean having all the answers, but having enough space within yourself to find the right path. And before we begin, I want you to make a commitment to yourself. Write in the comments, "Today, I choose clarity over insecurity." It's not just a phrase, it's a signal to your mind that change begins now. 1. Accept progress, not perfection. How many times have you failed to act because you thought, "I'm not ready yet"? How many projects have been left in the drawer? How many words have been stuck in your throat? How many dreams have never taken the first step because you believed you had to be perfect to start? Insecurity loves to disguise itself as perfectionism. It dresses itself up as high standards, but behind it, it's just fear. Fear of making mistakes, fear of being judged, fear of not being good enough. The problem is that the pursuit of perfection does not organize the mind. It paralyzes it. When you try to calculate every detail before moving, you create a maze within yourself. Every possibility becomes doubt. Every mistake becomes a sentence. Every failure becomes identity. And suddenly, instead of clarity, you are buried by self-imposed pressure. That is why the Stoics did not ask, "Did you do everything right?" but rather, "Did you move forward?" For Epictetus, progress was the real measure of life, not perfection. Marcus Aurelius knew that life does not happen under ideal conditions. He wrote, "Do not expect the perfection of Plato's Republic. Be content with even the smallest advance, and do not consider it small." This phrase carries a precious key. Value is not in doing something flawlessly, but in moving forward even when it seems like little. Because one step toward what matters, no matter how small, is already 1,000 times more powerful than 1,000 idle intentions. Think of an athlete. They don't start by lifting 100 pounds. They start small, repeating, stumbling, adjusting. The body responds to the process, not to the illusion of perfection. It's the same with the mind. Clarity comes when you dare to act, when you put ideas into practice, when you give voice to yourself even if you're trembling. With every action, no matter how small, you send a silent message to your brain. I can trust myself. And it is in this accumulation of small messages that true self-confidence is born. Perfectionism, on the other hand, steals your energy before you even begin. It convinces you that if it's not great, it's not worth it. But what is life if not a sum of small victories? Reading 2 pages a day is still reading. Saving a small amount every month is still building. Apologizing simply is still reconciliation. Waiting for the perfect moment is like waiting for the sea to be completely calm to learn how to swim. You'll die on the sand. Today's practice is simple. Choose one thing you've been putting off because you believe you're not ready. It could be sending an important message, starting a project, training, writing, recording, taking a risk. Do it imperfectly. Don't hide your flaws. Embrace them as part of the process. When you're done, instead of asking yourself, "Is it perfect?" ask, "Did it move me forward?" Because in the end, clarity does not come from absolute control, but from the courage to act amid uncertainty. And insecurity does not disappear by waiting. It dissolves in movement. All progress is a victory against mental confusion. Every imperfect step is a silent declaration of strength. If this lesson resonated with you, write in the comments, "I choose progress, not perfection." This is the choice of those who decide to clear their minds and leave insecurity behind. 2. Remember the brevity of life. Few ideas have as much power to clear the mind as this one. Memento mori. Remember that you will die. At first glance, it seems gloomy. But for the Stoics, it was just the opposite. It was a reminder of lucidity, a tool for clarity. Because when you put life under the lens of finitude, suddenly what seemed like an unbearable weight loses its size. Many of the insecurities we carry, the fear of judgment, the need to please, the doubt about every choice, simply crumble when we remember that time is short. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his diaries, "You could leave life now. Let that determine what you do, think, and feel." This sentence is not a threat. It is liberation. It invites us to live with urgency and intention. When you understand that each day could be your last, you realize how futile it is to waste energy on comparisons, on anxiety about scenarios that may never happen, on discussions that lead nowhere. The brevity of life puts everything in its proper place. Insecurity gains strength when we believe we have infinite time. We think there will always be another chance, that one day courage will appear on its own, that we can postpone what matters. But when we remember finitude, we realize that waiting is the greatest illusion. Time does not negotiate, does not ask permission, does not give anything back. And this awareness, far from being a burden, is what gives us clarity. Seneca said, "It is not that we have a short life, it is that we waste too much of it." How many hours have you spent wondering what others would think of you? How many opportunities have you missed for fear of making a mistake? How many times have you said to yourself, "One day I'll do it," but that day never came? This waste is the real thief of clarity, not a lack of ability, but a life consumed by waiting. Look back for a moment. How many of your biggest fears from 5 years ago have become irrelevant? That criticism, that insecurity, that doubt that seemed so huge. Today it no longer carries any weight. This is living proof that many of the battles we fight are illusions that evaporate over time. And if in 5 years you won't care, why carry that weight today? Memento mori is a call to reverse logic. Instead of living as if time were infinite, live as if each moment were too precious to be spent in mental confusion. Use this reminder not to despair, but to organize your priorities. If today were your last day, would you be satisfied with how you spend your time? Would you be at peace with the person you are becoming? Today's practice is straightforward. When you feel your mind clouded by insecurities, ask yourself, will this still matter in 5 years? Most of the time the answer will be no, and that answer is liberating because it gives you instant clarity. If it doesn't matter in the long run, it doesn't deserve to steal your peace now. Remember, life is too short to be wasted on mental noise, and when you honor this reminder, insecurity loses its power, clarity grows, and what really matters gains space. Write in the comments, "Today I choose to live with urgency and clarity," because awareness of death is not about fearing the end, it's about finally starting to truly live. 3. Cut out excess stimuli. We live in an age where the mind rarely knows silence. Every minute is invaded by notifications, messages, short videos, other people's opinions, instant comparisons. It's as if we're trying to think with 10 radios on at the same time. The result? Mental confusion, insecurity, and a constant feeling of being behind on everything. That's why cutting out stimuli isn't a luxury, it's psychological survival. The Stoics already warned of the danger of excess, even in an age without social media. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Most of the things we do and say are not essential. Eliminate them and you will have more time and more peace of mind." This sentence could have been written today, because the mind is not confused by a lack of information, but quite the opposite, by being overloaded with useless stimuli. Epictetus also reminded us, if you mix with fools, don't expect wisdom to remain in you. This is not just a criticism of the company we keep, but of everything we allow into our minds. If you consume hours of sensationalist news, if you spend your days surrounded by criticism, gossip, and comparisons, you cannot expect clarity. What goes in is what comes out. Garbage in, garbage out. Clarity in, clarity out. Insecurity grows in this polluted environment. Because the more stimuli you absorb, the more your mind compares, the more doubts it creates, the more voices overlap with your own. It's like trying to hear a melody amid deafening noise. The music is there, but you can't distinguish it. Your clarity is there, but it needs silence to be heard. Think about your daily life. How many times do you open your cell phone without even realizing it? How many times do you log into social media to take a look and come away filled with anxiety, comparison, distractions? This repetition creates a reactive mind, one that doesn't think, but only responds to what appears. And a reactive mind is never clear because it is always too busy reacting to reflect. The Stoic practice here is simple but powerful. Be the guardian of your mind. Consciously choose what enters your mental field. This may mean silencing groups that only complain, unfollowing profiles that arouse envy, drastically reducing time on social media, or swapping the flood of news for uplifting reading material. And it's not just about cutting out, but about replacing. When you reduce the noise, you make room for what really nourishes you. Imagine a room full of junk. You can even put up a beautiful painting, but it will never have an impact while surrounded by trash. The same is true of the mind. If you don't clean it out, good ideas have no room to flourish. So today's challenge is concrete. Identify 3 sources of mental noise and silence them for a week. It could be social media, a WhatsApp group, the news, or even that habit of checking your phone before bed. Notice the difference. You'll realize that clarity doesn't come from more information, but from less distraction. If this lesson spoke to you, write in the comments, "Today I choose silence to hear my own clarity." Because cutting out stimuli is not isolation, it is self-care. And when you protect your mind from excess, what was once confusion becomes focus, and what was once insecurity dissolves into presence. 4. Train your emotional self-control. An insecure mind easily gets lost in the heat of emotions. A harsh comment, a dirty look, unexpected criticism. Suddenly all your balance disappears and you react without thinking. The moment anger explodes, anxiety tightens your chest, or sadness paralyzes you, it seems impossible to remember that you have a choice. But it is precisely in that interval, between impact and response, that the power of self-control is born. The Stoics believed that true freedom was not in dominating the outside world, but in governing oneself. Epictetus said, "No one is free unless they are master of themselves." This means that as long as you are hostage to your impulses, you will never have clarity, because mental confusion arises not only from information overload, but also from the emotional turmoil that takes over when you don't choose how to respond. Seneca reinforced the same idea when he wrote, "Most of what bothers us does not come from things themselves, but from how we react to them." In other words, it is not the problem that steals your peace, it is how much you let it dominate you. Insecurity gains ground when you believe you cannot control yourself, when you think your emotions have more authority over you than your own reason. Think of a common situation. Someone is rude to you. Your first reaction is to respond in the same tone, defend yourself, justify yourself. But what if you took a breath first? What if you gave yourself space to think clearly? Often what seemed like a personal offense was just a reflection of the other person's pain. What seemed like urgency was just anxiety in disguise. Self-control does not erase emotion, but it puts it into perspective. It reminds you that feeling is not the same as acting. This does not mean becoming cold, insensitive, or robotic. On the contrary, it means cultivating the clarity to choose how to use emotional energy instead of being used by it. Anger can turn into courage. Fear can turn into caution. Anxiety can turn into preparation. But for that, you need a moment's pause. That moment is the training ground for self-control. Today's practice is clear. When you feel a strong emotion arising, don't react immediately. Take 3 deep breaths. Name what you are feeling: anger, fear, anxiety. Just the act of recognizing it separates you from the emotion. Then ask yourself, will this reaction strengthen or weaken me? If the answer is weaken, you already know you don't need to act on impulse. Training self-control is like strengthening a muscle. At first, it seems difficult to hold back, but every time you manage to pause, even for a second, you send a message to your mind: I am in control. And little by little, that message builds confidence. Because if you can control your reactions, nothing outside has real power over you. Write in the comments, today I choose to pause before reacting, because it is in this space of silence and awareness that clarity is born. And when you control yourself, insecurity ceases to be a prison and becomes just another emotion that you know how to navigate with confidence. But there's something important to understand. If you've been trying for a long time to step out of your comfort zone and learn more, but haven't been able to, there might be something you're not aware of. I know what it might be: anxiety. Anxiety is like a snake that creeps up silently and affects you without you even realizing it. It leaves you feeling unwell for days, months, and even years. Living like this is like being sick all the time, but I know a solution. Stoic philosophers, along with modern psychology, have a way to help you get rid of it. I managed to cure myself of this anxiety. I made a video explaining how you can get rid of this problem, and it's in the first comment. Click the link in the first comment and start healing yourself from this feeling of anxiety. 5. Question your thoughts. The insecure mind has a pattern, believing everything it thinks. A voice pops up saying, "You're not good enough," and instead of doubting it, you take it as truth. The idea that it will go wrong appears, and you already behave as if failure were inevitable. But here is the reality that the Stoics remind us of: thoughts are not facts. They are interpretations, often distorted, the result of fears, old habits, and beliefs that did not always originate with you. Epictetus said, "Men are not disturbed by things, but by the view they take of them." This phrase is an antidote to insecurity, because it's not the situation that destroys you, but the story you tell about it. The problem is not being ignored in a message, but believing that it means rejection. It's not receiving criticism, but assuming that it defines who you are. The mind creates narratives, and if you don't question them, you live imprisoned by ghosts. Think about it. How many times have you suffered for something that only existed in your imagination? Maybe you rehearsed conversations that never happened, felt anger at scenarios that didn't materialize, cried over rejections that were only in your head. Seneca already warned, "We suffer more in our imagination than in reality." When we blindly believe our thoughts, we give them power they don't deserve. Training clarity begins when you become an investigator of your own mind. Instead of accepting every thought as absolute truth, learn to ask, is this real or is it just fear? Does this come from my experience or from a belief that someone planted in me? Would I have the same view if I were calmer? These questions act as flashlights, dispelling the mental fog. Imagine an internal court. For years, you may have placed yourself in the dock, believing the accusations without the right to defend yourself. You are weak, you don't learn, you don't deserve it. What happens if, starting today, you get up from the defendant's chair and take on the role of judge? What changes when you start asking for evidence from your own thoughts? Often you will realize that the accusation was unfounded, just a repetition of old insecurities. Today's practice is simple. Whenever a thought arises that weakens you, write it down on a piece of paper. Then ask yourself, is this a proven fact or just an interpretation? If it is a fact, you can act on it. If it is an interpretation, you can let it go. This act of writing and analyzing takes away the power of automatic thinking and restores the power of clarity. You don't have to fight every negative idea. You just need to learn not to treat it as a sentence. When you question, you make room to see alternatives, to remember that reality is greater than the voice of fear. If this lesson spoke to you, write in the comments, "Today I question my thoughts before believing them." Because a clear mind is not one that has no bad thoughts, but one that has learned to discern which ones are worth paying attention to and which ones are nothing more than illusions. 6. Eliminate habits that weaken you. There is no mental clarity when you live daily with habits that secretly erode your confidence. Think about how you feel after repeating something you know isn't good for you, overeating, breaking a promise, making excuses for yourself. It may be small, it may even go unnoticed by others, but inside you an uncomfortable whisper arises, "I can't control myself." That whisper, repeated day after day, is what feeds insecurity. The philosopher Michel de Montaigne said, "Shame may not hurt the body, but it is the deepest pain of the soul. Every time you maintain a habit that weakens you, you condemn yourself in silence." And no matter how well you dress, smile, or pretend to be confident, inside your mind knows you are betraying yourself. And when you don't trust yourself, all your thoughts become confused. It's like trying to build a house on unstable ground. Any wind will knock it down. The Stoics understood that true power came from consistency. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself as if he were giving an account, "Be simple, be good, be authentic." Not because he wanted to appear perfect, but because he knew that living in contradiction is living in internal conflict. Clarity is the daughter of integrity. An aligned mind does not need to waste energy hiding, making excuses, avoiding mirrors. It simply acts. Look at your routine. What habits silently drain your energy? Maybe it's procrastination that delays your dreams, automatic comparisons that diminish you, consuming content that fills you with anxiety, or that toxic conversation you keep up just out of habit. Each of these habits is like a hole in a bucket. No matter how much motivation you fill it with, it will always leak. Eliminating these habits doesn't mean becoming a different person overnight. It means gradually cutting out what you know is holding you back. And you don't have to announce it to the world or wait for recognition. On the contrary, the silent cut is the most powerful, because it is in silence that self-respect is born. You don't have to tell anyone that you've stopped repeating a harmful habit, but every time you succeed, you feel a new strength within yourself. Today's practice is straightforward. Choose one habit that you know weakens you. Just one. Decide to eliminate it, or at least drastically reduce it over the next 7 days. Every time temptation arises, remind yourself, it's not about the habit itself, it's about who I want to become. And notice how this small decision, repeated over and over, begins to clear your mind and strengthen your confidence. Because in the end, confidence isn't built with words, but with actions that you yourself witness. When you eliminate habits that diminish you, you make room for integrity to flourish. And where there is integrity, mental confusion disappears. Write in the comments, "Today I cut out what weakens me so I can live with clarity." This is the simple gesture that separates insecurity from true inner strength. 7. Cultivate presence and simplicity. An insecure mind is like a table full of useless objects. You try to find what matters, but everything is buried under excess. That's why thinking clearly requires simplicity. The more you complicate your life, the harder it is to distinguish what is essential from what is just a distraction. And there can be no clarity when noise occupies the space that should be filled with presence. Marcus Aurelius said, "Most of what we say and do is not essential. Eliminate it, and you will have more time and peace of mind." This is the essence of Stoic simplicity. Live only with what strengthens you, cut out what confuses you. Because mental confusion comes not only from negative thoughts, but from the accumulation of commitments, desires, and concerns that you have never questioned. Insecurity thrives in this environment. When you try to please everyone, take on everything, and live according to what others expect, your mind becomes a battlefield of invisible battles. Every request is a burden. Every comparison is a demand. Every extra obligation is another stone in the path. But when you simplify, the scenario changes. You no longer need to prove anything to anyone, because you have learned to say no to what does not strengthen you. Seneca wrote, "One must learn to live simply, because only then does the mind remain free. And living simply does not mean giving up everything, but choosing consciously." Simplicity is not emptiness. It is the clean space that allows you to breathe, think, and act with clarity. Think about what happens when you tidy up a messy room. Suddenly, everything seems lighter, clearer. You find things that were lost. You enjoy being there. The same thing happens with the mind. When you cut out the superfluous, whether in your environment, habits, or thoughts, your presence is strengthened. You stop living on autopilot and start to see what really matters. The secret is to train your attention. When you sit down to eat but are already thinking about the next task, you miss the chance to be present. When you talk to someone but your mind is on your cell phone, you waste the opportunity for real connection. Presence is not a mystical theory. It is simply living the moment with integrity. It is ceasing to be a distracted visitor in your own life and finally inhabiting it. Today's practice is straightforward. Write down 3 priorities that really matter to you today. Just 3. Anything beyond that is superfluous, and during these activities, decide to be fully present. Put your cell phone aside, breathe before you begin, notice every detail. You will be surprised by the clarity that arises when your mind stops racing in all directions and learns to be here, now. Cultivating simplicity is an act of courage, because the modern world wants to convince you that complexity is synonymous with importance. But the truth is that a clear life is not a full life, it is a well-chosen life. If this lesson has touched you, write in the comments, "Today, I choose simplicity to live with clarity." Because in the end, the insecure mind gets lost in 1,000 paths, but the present mind finds strength in the essential. Insecurity will always try to infiltrate your thoughts. It will whisper that you are not enough, that you are not ready, that you need more proof to act. But now you know clarity does not come from waiting, it comes from practicing. And each of the 7 lessons we have seen is a tool against this mental fog that confuses, paralyzes, and steals your strength. Accepting progress instead of perfection is freeing yourself from the impossible burden of being flawless. Remembering the brevity of life is putting every concern into perspective. The Stoics never promised a life without challenges. On the contrary, they knew that the world is full of uncertainties, pain, and unforeseen events. But they also knew that none of this needs to rob those who have learned to live with inner strength of their clarity. And this strength is not unattainable. It is built one gesture at a time, one questioned thought, one decision aligned with what really matters. If this message resonated with you, write in the comments, "Today I choose clarity over insecurity." This phrase is not just a comment, it is a decision, a way to show your mind that change begins here and now. And before you leave, remember, like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and subscribe to the channel. Because clarity is not just a gift you give yourself, it is a light that can also guide others.